Well, in this meeting, we're going to talk about getting the way you can get the most information out of the resources that are there. And last time we talked about sort of what you expect to find there, but not the process of drilling down into the bits that you might want to use. So that's the point of today's session. It's like advanced use of the clan records we're going to talk about. Using the various search functions to dig down, that's something. I'll talk about the Black Isle districts that I mentioned just a minute ago, because we haven't yet dealt with those. We've dealt with the main West Coast parishes, but now we're going to talk about what you expect in the way of places on the Black Isle. We're going to talk about what you might find in the family histories, and we're going to talk about some of these other areas like clan statistics that you've briefly seen something of at the last meeting, World War I Roll of Honour, and so on. Obviously, it's great. It seems to be working quite well, allowing for questions and discussion and other people helping to answer the questions during the meeting. So feel free to continue with that by asking a question if you come across something that turn your microphone on. Otherwise, though, keep it off. A couple of you, would a couple of you like to tell us things that you've taken up since our last meeting? That is, you know, you thought about, oh, I could find something out by using that. Has someone got something to offer there? Something you did since the last meeting? Gone quiet. Carolyn's got a microphone on. You done any research since last meeting, Carolyn? You didn't mean to have it on. No.
Maybe a little bit. Not much, really.
Okay. All right. Well, let's continue on then. So when you first joined, I sent you a link to talk about. You can turn it off now, the mic, Carolyn.
Oh.
Okay. In case the dog comes in.
Might.
I advised you to go to this advanced search thing here. I'll just turn on the pointer. This advanced search part of the screen, and we're going to look a bit more at some of these other things here. Most of them are not that relevant, I've got to say to you, but some of them are very, very handy for you to get in. So that's how you, and I usually sent you the number of your ancestor. I just want to point to this this fella here. I just came across him in you know, doing some work in the last week or so, and I thought, oh, I'll put this in as an example. This fella, we've got a photo here. That's a photo from Chief Ronnie's book. That's this book here. Yeah. And, you know, there are a number of pictures in here of different people, and this photo of George is one of them. There are a number of places, though, that come up in here. Oh, sorry, let me just go back here. He's got this nickname, George Stewart, and I want to you to remember that, because we're going to use that to see how we find people. There's some names here that you don't really know, like Kilcoy, like Killianan, Rosemarkie, Knockbane. You see these names? They're names that, you know, you probably we haven't come across in our meetings before. And also you see this word grieve here, which, you know, is not a very familiar word to the rest of us, I don't think. Okay, so where is the Black Isle, where these places are that we've just seen there on that fellow's page? You can see up here, there's the Black Isle there. And that's all we know about it at this stage, right? We've just got this one thing. Let's go into it in a bit more detail. Here's the Black Isle, and these, as usual, the orange words are the parish names, generally speaking, in most parts of the period we're dealing with. And you can see the other Scottish trick is that it's not really an island, right? Like Lewis and Harris are not really separate islands. They've got land in between. And this one has land here. So it's a bit hard to say where the Black Isle ends. Different definitions have different, you know, counties. But this sometimes has included this parish here, Urry, which we haven't specifically said. I've included these two, Conton, that we talked about so much previously, and of course Inverness, to just you to get your bearings about where we're talking about. This is the firth that's there, and now we have this bridge over the two firths, this Bewley Firth and Moray Firth here. but in the old days, of course, there wasn't a bridge there. There was a ferry in former times across there, but you know, it's a relatively recent thing, that bridge. And in the past, people had to go around this way, this was called the Great North Road going up here. But now you've got this road goes across this spectacular bridge and takes you to the Tor roundabout in here. So that's a bit of a reference point, this Tor roundabout. Some of you know that, what I'm talking about? It's a big, what do you call it? Rotary. You know what I mean. And so these parishes, this one here has a lot of MacLennans in it. It's called Urquhart and Logie Wester. And because you're in the third session, I remembered to say that this Urquhart is not the Urquhart. There's another Urquhart down near Fort William and Drumnadrocket, you know, down the other end of Loch Ness. And that's in Inverness-shire, right? This is Ross-shire here, that's the other name. And Inverness-shire. So down here, we've got another Urquhart, but in Inverness-shire. So you usually see Glen Urquhart or Urquhart, Inverness in brackets, that sort of thing, to tell you that it's not this one they're talking about. This one is Urquhart and it's usually written with an A-N-D, but I couldn't fit it in. Already I had to make that font a bit smaller to fit them in. And actually this parish has quite an interesting history, because although we think of it as being wholly in Ross-shire, in fact, it was part of the county of Nan-shire here for technically until the 1890s. So, in fact, if you try to look up this parish in Ancestry, they get really confused because they're trying to put you into another part of the world for the county. So you sort of have to type it in manually into Ancestry to get that parish in. And usually people writing it will just write Urquhart, maybe Ross in brackets like that when they're writing it for their place where they came from. So it's a little bit tricky, that parish there. And the ancient name, and in fact, yeah, for most of this, nearly the same boundaries, is this name here, Ferntosh. So when you see people writing that they came from Ferntosh in their censuses, you know that they really mean they came from what we call the parish of Urquhart and Logie Wester. That's the official name. And most of it is the same. And the sort of centre of it, in terms of like where the church is, for example, is this place, Conan Bridge. It's quite an interesting little place to go to. And that, of course, is the bridge before this bridge here was built. The railway goes over there too. Yeah, so, and then this parish down here has quite a few MacLennans. You find them all over the world, and they will sometimes say they came from Redcastle or from Kilcoy, rather than say they came from Killianan. So a bit in the same way that people would say they came from Ferntosh. They won't say they came from Killianan, they'll say they came from Redcastle. These are all like Mackenzie territories, right? The big picture is that Mackenzies had control of the Island Donan, you know, the strategic fort location there in the Loch Duick and so on, the three lochs confluence, you might say. And they moved slowly eastward through this narrow pass. You know, this here is a narrow way to get to the west coast, just through here, not much of a gap at all. And the Mackenzies moved gradually across here, establishing their bases in this part of the world here. Bran Castle, you know, is the Mackenzie HQ in the 1600s probably. And then they occupied and took over control of all these parts. Most of Ross-shire was controlled by Mackenzie. So you see Mackenzies, you know, being the sheriffs and the ministers and these sorts of positions where they can influence the decisions of the districts. This Knockbane here is another parish. That place that I showed you, the pipe tune was written about, Drum Durfit or Defeat, is just in here. And this is Munlochy Bay in here. We see a lot of MacLennans around there. Going up here a bit, you've got, this is a place where there was a famous academy that a few people in our database studied at, like yeah, mathematics and so on. And then, of course, across this narrow gap here, you have the amazing Fort George. Any of you been there? Put your hand up if you've been to Fort George. like the extraordinary thing about it was built after, here's Culloden, that's where Culloden, you know, Battle of Culloden Moor took place. And then subsequently they spent something like several times the GDP of Scotland building this incredible, well, white elephant really, fort out on the headland here. But the thing about it is that most forts are built facing the sea to defend against maritime attack, right? But this fort was built to defend against land people, that is Scots, attacking the British forces. So it's just an extraordinary thing built by the Hanoverians, as some would say, to protect themselves against further uprisings like the Jacobite risings of the 1840s, 1740s. Yeah, so these are the other names that you'll expect to see around there. I think that's enough to talk about that. We're going to see this word here mentioned in talking about this George that we're talking about, and Fairburn is an estate in the parish of Urry, yeah? And there are other castles like the one, you know, Jamie from Outlander and all that, what I showed you on that earlier screen show. Okay, any questions about that? So let's look at the advanced search function, the main one that I point you to when you first join. And we're going to look at both the individual one, which is what this is. This is talking about people. And we're going to look at the family one. That's this link here, which since most of you have joined, that's a new thing. Then we're going to look at other events. That's this down here, other events. And then I'm going to separately look at notes. Let's look at, whoop, that's too far. I got jumped the gun there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open this screen up. Okay, now I'm going to drag it up so you can see it up there. And here we have an actual search screen like the one we just showed you, but we're going to use the live one. Now, I'm just making stuff up from now on. This is just live as we go. Let's say I put in John here, and you'll see what happens. And then I'll explain to you a little bit more. So John, I put in, I get 4,200 Johns. And you can see I'm getting all sorts of surnames, and I'm getting names with John as one of the names, people with John as one of their names. Yeah. And then I can go, you know, to number 85, and I can see other Johns there, 81, you know, and so on, different Johns. Now, when I come back to this screen, you can see here there's a drop-down list. You see how that's got different options there? And every time there's an upgrade to this TNG software that we use, we reset these here so that the default for the first name is contains, and the default for the last name is Soundex. You see that? So this word, there's no stars. You can't use the stars that we saw when we did that first session in Scotland's People. But you can put contains in, and you can even put contains. Let's say you wanted Catherine, for example. It could be Kate, or it could be Katie, or it could be Catherine with a K, all these things. You might even put just one letter in there to get the Zachariah, someone I came across. You know, you could put Z in there, Z MacLennan, you might find Zacharias. I'm just going to put Soundex, so we'll put MAC, for example. Zachariah, that was somebody I came across yesterday. Oh, no, you get all the Elizabeths, right? I don't know, you can put start, contains, starts with, okay. Look at that. This is another good name. Zachariah, known as Zachy. So that particular guy that we saw, so you can see what we're doing here. I'm using these options as a way of fine tuning the thing. So let's go back to John. And if I put John in here, and instead of putting John contains, I'm going to put John equals. So you'll only get John's, and you won't get any middle name or second given name. See, they're all John. Someone's got an MBE, but that MBE is not part of his name. It's a title. and he was police inspector. If I look at that particular one, that fellow, this is quite a scandalous story, this one about Hong Kong. But he's got the title police inspector. It's not one of his first names. So we're getting just the Johns if I do that. And you can see also that I put MAC in here, but SoundX will give us, that's why we have that as the default. It'll give us MAC MacLennans and also MC MacLennans and the older form of it. And it'll give me also, did you see when on the first one, it's giving us McLean. So you can see there, or McLean, do you say? Sometimes, you know, North Americans call that McLean, don't they? Or is it more likely to have a capital C if it's McLean, like the toothpaste? Anyway, you get that name because it sounds enough like MacLennan, it will give you that. So you probably, you know, you'd like to sort of forget about those, but you can't. So that's the idea of SoundX we're talking about there. And how many have we got to go? There we go. Now, what's another example? Like if I put a name that commonly, girls' names, of course, we've seen before, Jessie and Janet and all these sort of names. Like Anne is one that in Scotland is more often spelt without an E, much more often. So if I put in contains, I'm going to, you know, if you're looking for an Anne who, even if you think has an E, or might be called Annie, I-E at the end, then you would use that spelling, and that way you'll get, let's see if I can find some. You'll get, see, you get some that have the other letter, like Annie. Okay, there are not many coming up, a lot of those Anns. The other thing I should explain to you shortly is, do you see how we've got some people here with the girl name Anne with a name brackets MacLennan? You see that? A lot of them, 30 something of them. Just for Anns there are 30. What does that mean? Anybody come on, give me a clue here what it means. Why have we got that? Why are we showing it like that? It's a convention in genealogy. People do it a lot, always.
Is that a maiden name?
Hmm?
Maiden name.
It's the, no, it's not the maiden name. That's the point. Anybody else? Stephen?
Is it the married name?
Hello. Yeah, it's a married name, exactly. It's where we see like a family, and we have, hello Peter. We see we found the family, let's say in 1860 we found the family, and we can see that there's a wife called Anne, but we don't know from seeing her in a census what her maiden name was, and we haven't yet found it. Maybe that's possible, you know, because they possibly were married some time ago or not registered, or we haven't yet found it or whatever. And so, you know, typically these people that you don't have any birth date for, or they're really a long time ago birth dates, you see. You can see how that's a bit of a pattern there, isn't it? You know, they're normally, well, of course the earlier ones would be, but it's true of all of them. You see that? There's one there, likely Dutch Indies, Dutch East Indies, right? So, you know, they're generally, you can sort of see how it's likely we didn't know. We know they're married to a MacLennan, that's their married name. We're still waiting to find their maiden name. And we know this because someone, we were reminded of it because a fellow who's a really, really good researcher said, you don't have this person in the database, this marriage in the database, so we'll have to make a new marriage. But in fact, we had the wife as a bracketed name like that, like the example we saw. Now, coming down here to these other ones, you can see this, the other fields. Of course, if you get the ID number, you just put it into this field here. Okay, there's some random people that we might put in. So I can just put the number in, and it doesn't matter whether you put the I in as a capital or a lowercase, it'll still find it. There's somebody, Angus MacDonald, married to Catherine MacLennan. And there's Catherine. She looks a bit severe to me, that woman. Don't tell her I said that, will you? Yeah. You had the odd relationship too. So maybe that's what hardened her up. It shouldn't. So yeah, so there's the that's what happens with the ID number. Now let's look at these other things down lower. This tricks me so often, I can't tell you, that I always assume that these sorts of programs will take the date and then the place where the person was born, but this one's the other way around. You put the place in and then you put the date. So let's just put a place in here, like we might put Inverness County. And I can just put a part of it in, right? Contains, but it won't give me Inverness Shire, will it? Because we don't use that term. And this is giving me the people born in, look at them all, in Inverness County, Nova Scotia. Lots of them. 330 people, Carolyn. You should be happy with that. Yeah. And some of your ancestors too. I should put MacLennan in. A lot of non-MacLennans there, aren't there? Their last name. So you see, if I want to put in, okay, I'll just put Soundex of MacLennan. And we got 230 odd MacLennans and MacLeans as well. Yeah, look at all these other odd ones, Soundex coming up. Right, a few Allens, River Dennis people. Yeah. So yeah, that's how you look at look for a. And you know, the main point we've been making all this time is cast your net wide. That's always my point here, isn't it? That don't bother putting in a year. If you can narrow it down enough by not putting in a year, like Zachariah, I don't need a year for him because only one of him. Don't be really specific in your search, because the chances are you'll eliminate them rather than you'll go too far. So the same, you put a year in here. But the year I want to show you, let's say you're looking for somebody born in, you're pretty confident they're born in 1877, that's what you have in your thing, or that's what your own program, or that's what you got from a census. But the chances are they're born a year or two either side of that. So you can drop down here, and this is what I would always do. I'd put in a range of, let's say, 5 years either side of the thing, and look at that, I get even in Inverness County, Nova Scotia, I'm getting 42, but you know, that's a manageable list. I can scroll down there even without a given name, and I can look for different people. Maggie or Margaret, there she is, and we've got a census in there for her. We've got her marriage and her children, River Dennis people. Yeah, so quite a lot of stuff there. And now the other thing I want to show you is the nickname in here. So what I'm going to do is I'll just reset by clicking on here. You can see, follow this okay, with the mouse, you can see the cursor going around. Carolyn, can you see the cursor moving? So what I showed you earlier was that this fellow, although we have his first name in his record as being George, and that's how he's always shown in censuses and birth and marriage and everything, but some people know him as George Stewart. It's actually a bit related to, no, I won't go there. So George Stewart is his nickname. In other words, we've got it in not in the main field for his given name, but in the nickname field, you remember. So I'm going to put that in there, and I'm going to say, even without putting the surname in, give me George. Look at that. So what you can see is that when it does the search for the individual, it uses the nickname field. This is really good to know if you've got somebody who you're not sure if they're called Janet or Jessie in these records. Quite likely Janet or Jessie has the name Janet and the nickname Jessie, or vice versa. Could be vice versa. But what will happen is that you'll find both Janets and Jessies, even if you only put it into the name search field. But you do have a nickname field. A nickname. I'll just Control X that. And that's if we go down here. You see this other events? Can you all see that? And you have to click on here to see these other events. And you see the first one you come across is nickname. Now here we've got Sound X. I don't know what'll happen, quite frankly. But that's the only thing I'm searching for, George Stewart, right? Now, everything else is blank. Search. Boom. Look at that. So I'm showing you now these other events down here. It's a bit of a nuisance because you can't, let's say you didn't find him that way. You've got to reset it. Unlike up here, it stays in there when you come back to it. You've got to reopen this every time. Most of these things here we don't use. We don't put things into, that means. One we do put things into is occupation. And we don't put every occupation. Obviously, when someone's described as a student when they're at school still, or described as a homemaker, that's a term sometimes used. We don't put occupation homemaker into people for the time they're a homemaker. And likewise for people who have short occupations, you know, doing different things. But if they've got a sort of fairly unique occupation, then we would put it in. Let's say, what's an example? Somebody want to offer an example? Peter, you got an idea? Nice to see you. How's the weather in Buenos Aires today? Your mic's still off.
Yeah, very cold today.
Very cold. Oh.
Occupation could be a farmer, it could be a crofter, fisherman.
Yeah, okay. Fishermen we don't always put in, but sometimes if they're like dedicated, because often people are fishermen part-time in Scotland, particularly. But if they look like they're a serious fisherman that does fishing all their lives, then we could put that in. Let's see what happens if we put that in. I'm going to change this to contains, yeah? So I don't know what other word might be put with fisherman, but who knows? Well, let's put fish. Let's just put fish. See what happens. Because sometimes they're described as fishers, aren't they? You know, not that many women are fishers. Okay, so we've got a number of people who are described as fishermen, quite a few. 233. So you want to pick somebody? Lockout, Scarelock. Okay, we'll try one of them. Yeah, see that? That one's described as fisherman in his occupation field. Yeah? And so it goes on. Married twice.
Another one I've come across a couple of times, gamekeeper.
Gamekeeper, let's do that.
Yeah.
Good one. I like it. Now you see what happened there? See how that's gone away? Whereas if it was up here, it would have stayed there. So I'm going to put in here, gamekeeper. What about deer stalker? It's a similar thing, deer stalker. You presumably could be both. Can you see occupation here? Okay, gamekeeper. Or I could put in gamekeeper, or I might put just game in. See, I don't know if there's any other words. Let's put gamekeeper.
There is another word.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's not like two words. Could you have game, anything else? No. What was the other word you were thinking of?
Guinea or something like that, aren't they called?
What's that? Oh, gilly. Yeah.
Gilly, okay.
Gilly, yeah.
Yes,
It means like a son, you know that, gilly? It means like it's like a caddy. The caddy is a Scottish word, I think. So that's a sort of idea, you know, like you hand the clubs to the master golf player. The same with a gilly. It's like a, you know, helper. Okay, so here we got gamekeepers. Let's see if we can find Duncan. Duncan. I know he's the one that's a deer stalker, Duncan. Sorry. So, okay, here's a random gamekeeper. But he's the same part of the world, actually. This part here, this place, is down south of, south of Bewley, really. It's the best way to describe it. And it's in the parish that Bewley is in. There's not Kiltarnity, but, that's all called Kiltarnity. But Kilmorach. Anyway, so there you go. Got a gamekeeper there coming up. So that's a way, you know, if you know that they've got a unique occupation. Another one might be minister, like a church minister, or a doctor. And sometimes we might put doctor of medicine, for example. Let's go contains again. We might put doctor in there and hit enter. And there you go, you come up with all these people. I would assume many of them are not in Scotland. Quite a few of them are though, aren't they? Okay. This guy here, this guy here I came across only by coming across him signing it, certifying a death certificate in near Applecross in that area there, Loch Carron way. You can see born in Conton, died in Argyllshire, a bit like our fellow George that we're talking about. So let's go back to this screen here. Now I'm going to move across. I'm talking about individual to date, but now I'm going to move across to this one here. And on the main home screen, you've got underneath advanced search, you've got families, search families. So search families. This is really the key to it all. I happen to know that our George that we've been talking about is married to somebody called Scott, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it, what I can remember, you know, we're going to simplify. We're not going to put in everything we know about this fellow. We even know his surname, but let's not put that in. We're going to put in here, Scott as the wife's name. I don't think we need contains for that, do we? Well, maybe if it only had one T, but it's unlikely. So we're going to just bang that in. And look, we just got one marriage, and it's in this Cullinan. That's a place that we know from our just talking about the Black Isle. He's got a very low number, F5, and look, there he is. And that's what you see for the family screen, the marriage of George and his wife, Margaret Scott. So just with those two things in the search field, I was able to find George by knowing that he was married to a Scot. So really, I got to say to you, that's the simplest way to do it. To look, instead of trying to find an individual, look for the marriage. It's like I've been saying all the time, you know, that gives you the best chance where you've got 4 names to match against to home in on the person you're talking about. So here's George. There's, you know, we've got the census. We don't, of course, have an exact date for his birth because he's before 1855. We've got an exact date for his thing. We've got this role here, grieve. You know this term, grieve? I'm really not that sure. I don't use it every day either, but yeah, I see it quite often. And on asking a few people about it, you know, I think to call it farm manager is a bit of a, it sort of implies they might sit in an office and do bookkeeping. No, it means more like a sort of working person, like almost like a person who owns the farm. Well, a sort of a foreman might be another term you could use, you know. It's someone meaning that they're out on the site working as well as managing. Yeah, so there you go. Now this fellow, let's just go, we're looking at his family now. So we've got Margaret Scott and we've got there. Now look at that, there's another good illustration of what we were talking about earlier. Urquhart, we know this one, is that on the Black Isle? Come on, work with me here, people. Black Isle, yes or no? Thumbs down. Yeah, so she came from that Urquhart that's down south of Inverness, down toward, on the Loch Ness. And they had a reasonable sized family, just 10. And some of these people, like this one here, died in Montreal, in Quebec, yeah? And quite young too, 32 years old. He's an interesting character. I happen to know a bit about him. We've got here the transcript. You see that there? We've got the transcription of the birth record for this guy, and he's born on Fairburn, Mains. Look at that. We saw that on the map. We know where that is now, don't we? Part of Urry parish. But what I'd like to see in there is the citation. See, we've just got the transcription. I'd like somebody to go and send that in to me saying ID number 88525 doesn't have the citation for the birth. That is the search results from Scotland's people. So here it is, paste it in. And I'd do that happily. But you know, there are so many, I can't do them all. And here he is. He's called King of the Dancers, this son of George and Margaret. Look at him. That's his picture. And that's actually out of the chief's book as well.
Bruce, I have a question for you.
Who's that?
Can you link, this
Oh,
is
Stephen,
Stephen.
yep.
Can you link a media file to multiple records?
Yeah.
So if there's a record with
Yeah.
multiple names in it, you can attach it to
Yeah,
everybody's
well,
record.
let's see down here. This is one example that I won't do that one actually. I usually, and it's something interesting, good point, Stephen, that usually the bulk of the things about a marriage go with whichever spouse is the MacLennan spouse. Meaning, like, you know, we might, in the past especially, but, you know, still stuff about what's happened in the marriage, like, you know, a child dying or some other event will be in the husband or the wife, whichever is the MacLennan of the couple. The original little collection of records I got just had all we knew about it was the name of the spouse, nothing, no detail about date of birth or death or anything. But here you go. This is an example here. This is a single page document. And it's linked to all these people across here. See that? That's GS, you know, the famous fella. Donald George, all those people, they're all mentioned in here. GD MacLennan, William MacLennan. So you see that, Stephen? That answer your question? So multiple people, yes. It gets, some of them are quite long, and we'll see more examples of it later. What I wanted to show you here in these attachments is that you see how this one doesn't have an actual thumb of the document, and that's because this particular thing is more than one page. All these other ones are just a single page document. This one is an old article from 1966, a long time ago, before the chief had really done all his research. But this was during that time, and he was, Chief Ronnie was interviewed by this magazine, and the article was put in this magazine. So what I'm going to show you is what happens. If I click on that, you can see up here the downloading happening. See that? Because different browsers handle these things differently. Sometimes they'll display it. I'm not sure whether Chrome does it, it displays or not, but this is Firefox I'm using here. And it's brought that down into the download folder. You can see I've done it twice before already. And here's this article that has 6 pages. It's a PDF, 6 pages of PDF, you see. And so this is this person here interviewing Ronnie here. I'm Ronnie MacLennan, yeah. Any relation to dancing and piping, So she's interviewing him, and there's like a tree there of how all these people, performing people, at that time he thought were interconnected. And, you know, a lot of truth in it. There's the odd bit that's not quite right, but not much. So here are some of the people. This is Alexander, a famous piper from Inverness, you know, and in military terms. This is just a random person here. You know him. He's the Fiachara Gunner, he's called. And he's an old tramp who hung around making mischief, you know, setting off bunga crackers and things like that, you know, fireworks. And here are these people again, you know, different performers, and so on, pipers. There's that GS, you know, and other people. So this is like an article that is quite a good article. This is the chief's ancestor. A group. There's Ronnie with a group of dancers. There he is there. And I'm not sure who that other fella is. And that's where he lived, in this place, Hart Hill. In fact, you know, the funny thing is that Rory's wife comes from there too, down near Stirling it is. Okay, so that's a download thing I've got there. Let me just see if I can close that without too much danger. Right, and there's a Montreal marriage record. You get some really unusual things in Montreal. So that's one of his kids. Another one of his kids was died in New Zealand. There you go. Poverty Bay, that's a good place to be dying, isn't it? And he was a music instructor. and a musical person. Teacher of dancing, sorry, yeah, dancing, that's it, another dancer. Died in New Zealand. Okay, so we've been looking at families now, and you can see that that's the way you get down to these parts. So I think we've dealt enough with families. Any questions about family searching? I should remind you what we saw in that original one, that just sometimes our wife's name there is recorded as the bracketed version, the married name rather than the maiden name. Yeah. We've looked at other events as we talked about there. Yep, that's good. So now I'm going to go back by clicking up here. You can go back to the main home screen, and I'm going to show you another trick, which is this notes search. The most powerful thing you'll learn today, this is. So looking at most of these things here, not so important. We're going to come back to this one. But this one here, you see it says notes. It's a simple, very simple, but very powerful search through every word that's in our 42,000 notes, and comes up with all the people who have the word you're searching for within their notes. They're the notes that are part of that person's profile. So let's say I put in here Kilcoy. That was a place that we saw in relation to George, wasn't it? That's not how you spell it though. Kilcoy. And Kilcoy. Let me just do that again. Right, Kilcoy. Yeah. Search. It can take a little while to perform the search function. And here we are. You can see here we've got 149 notes have got the word Kilcoy in it. Can you believe that? I wonder if it's still whirring. Sometimes it can take, you know, a few minutes, and that's because this collection isn't indexed, of course. But you can see that that first one there has Kilcoy in its notes, and this is Alexander. He's born about 1827. You can see in the census. Here's another one, got more notes. This person is referred to in a book, Scott's Corner, blah, blah, and must be there somewhere. So as the notes get bigger, as this one here is, you begin to think, well, why am I actually searching through all this to find the word Kilcoy? Might not be the one I want, Catherine. So what I suggest you do is use the search function in the browser. You know, if you hit Control F in Windows machines, you get this thing down. You see down the bottom there? Can you see that? And now I can put Kilcoy in there, and I can just click on that down. Come on. And find every instance of that. So in that note there, you can see the word Kilcoy is over in there, and you might have skipped over it if you didn't use the search function. But similarly, you might think, well, I want to know about a particular person that might or might not be this person out here. So let's say I look for another name of a person, or I might even want to look for a person that's in any of these notes. So let's say instead of putting the same word as I originally searched for in the note search, in here I can also search for a word, let's say Roderick. We want Roderick. Roderick. And I can search through the pages for Roderick, see that? So that helps me to do a sort of double search. Like I can search initially to get a list of all the notes that have Kilcoy in it, and then I can go searching again to find another word, a unique word, that and say, yes, this is the one I want, the one who's got a parent, Roderick, Shepherd, you know, Catherine, whatever. So that's a useful tip in how to home in on the notes. Any questions about notes, searching notes? Star's going to ask something. I can see she's itching.
Okay. So when I was looking at my great-grandfather, Duncan Alexander, I know sometimes the dates aren't accurate, but when I had a professional do the research, they found a birth record that has him listed as April 23rd, 1868. But I now have, my aunt has given me the front of the family Bible, and in that it says the 25th of April. So you want that noted in the notes rather than, where would you want all those odd bits of
notes.
information?
That's what you do in the notes, yeah.
Okay.
It's
so
funny though you can't, but 1868 is
family
after.
Bible?
Sorry?
Would you want the family Bible information?
Yeah, sure. Even a picture of it.
In the official piece or the birth record?
Well, we'd put both really, and put sometimes it's a baptismal date in the Bible.
Okay.
And of course, you know, a bit like dying. Sometimes people are born 5 minutes either side of midnight, and it's a bit unclear which they died, whether it was the day you found them dead in the morning or the night before. But that's not the point here, is it? The point here is that we would like really to parallel Scotland's people unless clearly there was an error. 1868, we should have definite evidence. You know, it's a bit more dodgy with the pre-1855. I'm talking Scottish records now. Of course, in other parts, like in Cape Breton, you have a lot of variety, you know, because in Cape Breton, there were no records up until the early 1900s, and then a bit patchy. And many statutory declarations were done years later and may or may not be, you know, exactly accurate. Though it could have been done many decades later, like in the 1950s, people born in the 1890s.
Okay.
But in Scotland, yeah, after 1855, you should have accurate records. I'd be interested to look into that case, Star. Send me the link to it.
Okay, well, and this would have been Cape Breton.
Oh, I see. Well, there you go. I remember now you're at White Mountains, aren't you? So that's why you're getting poor signal, yeah? You're
Yes.
doing this on your phone. You're doing it on your cell phone.
No, this is a computer, but we're in the middle of storms.
Ah, because the sound was a bit wavy there, but it's still typical of, you know, poor bandwidth. Well, I hope you're having a lovely holiday there in the White Mountains in Maine.
Yeah.
We are.
Good.
Wet. It's wet.
Ah, wet. Never mind. Okay, so we've sort of looked at most of that aspect. Now let's move on here. And I want to talk about what are called clan histories. We saw a minute ago that there were things like, you know, attached articles and short things attached to individual people and sometimes to a number of different people, like that example of the interview with Chief Ronnie. But then we also have these things that you and I would call books, known in the software as histories. And we have over 50 books. Some of them are simply about a particular family and mainly comprise a printout from something like Family Tree Maker or some equivalent, and have a bit of text wrapped around probably at the beginning to give a bit of a story, but basically they might be mainly about just an extract from it, and that's fine and handy, good resource. But other books, like for example, the book I showed you before, Chief Ronnie's book, is obviously of much more general interest to clan members across, you know, different aspects of, because he covers, you know, North America and New Zealand and all these parts. And so that's a book that we have in there that we remade for the family history section. And another one would be this book that's written by these credible people, Jimmy Glasgow, that we talked about before, and Malcolm Lobban, who was the secretary, I think, or one of those two. And, you know, that's quite a thick book of content, and we've got that in there for you to use for your research, and much easier to use digitally. So general books about the clan as well. I think I've covered most of those points. I've got to mention, though, to you that before these talks started, I was converting over the books from the method that we had used to publish them to a new method. Google particularly and other browsers have become increasingly wary of the method that we used originally to create the flip books, they're called, that's the term used, to deliver separate pages. I mean, the problem is that you've got a book that's, you know, quite thick, and you obviously can't download that book because it's too thick, so you download separate pages one at a time, a bit in advance of where the person's reading up to. And that's the method of getting it to the user across the internet. And I was moving to a method that's called HTML5. It's now the sort of acknowledged way to do these things, and I'm about like a third or maybe nearly a halfway through the books, converting them over. But it's quite a lengthy exercise to convert the books over. So you'll see different ways of getting the book to you, and in the end, I should have them all converted over to HTML5, and we won't use Adobe Flash anymore. That was the old method that's fallen out of favor. As you go into the Adobe Flash books, you'll see various browsers will give you different messages saying, are you sure you want to do this? You know, this might be insecure, that sort of thing. Well, obviously with our site, it's not insecure, but if you're going to some, you know, dodgy site, dodgy, you know that word, you'd be, you know, a bit more cautious if you were going into a site and it said, sure you want to use Flash? Okay, so now I'm going to drag back, hopefully, that page. Well, look at that. And we'll look at some books. So I'm going to come up to the top here. I'm going to go to, click on that one to go back to the main page, and then I can go to Histories. You see this here? Histories. And you can see there are 50 books in the library of books that we have available. And they're all different types of books. This is more like a book. In fact, this is a book we made, but someone had published it beforehand and he gave me the content and we remade that book. This one here is a book from a person who, a lovely person who had been a stalwart of the clan for many years and is about to turn 94, I think. She lives on an island just off Vancouver Island. And these are other books here. This is a book written by someone in Connecticut that, you know, she gave me the stuff and I made up a sort of, this is a sort of mock-up cover. So different ones. This is this guy that we saw the picture of a short time ago, Fia Chiragana. And I finally found out who this guy, the author, is. Until a couple of months ago, I didn't know. He only describes himself ever as A.B. MacLennan. And I now know who he is. He was a policeman. Actually, for a while, he came from the Black Isle, but for a while he was a policeman out on Uist, you know, that we looked at on the previous session. So you know what I'm talking about there. So these are the sort of things you see. And eventually you'll get down to the Chief's book down here. If you keep going, we should, this is a book somebody gave me when I was in Vancouver. A great book. It's got fantastic. It has all those people who went to Java and that sort of thing. This is my own book here, you know. It's a book of 1,000 pages about, you know, my ancestor, that you can go in there and look at it. That one actually gets delivered from the National Library of Australia rather than from our collection. Too big. So let's have a look at one of these books.
Bruce?
Yeah?
It's Aaron. Sorry, I just have a question. Can some of these books be downloaded in a PDF form,
No.
or are they all?
No, it's part of the deal with the publishers that they can be read online, searched online, but not printed or downloaded.
Okay, thanks.
And they're not in a form where you could read them with an e-reader either. Their form is PDF. I make the book into a PDF, and then the software from there takes over and delivers the pages separately. You know what I mean?
Thanks.
So here's the book by Mary Davidson from, you see what happens? It goes to that, did you see that? It goes to, I'll just do it again so you see what happens. When I click on here with this new method, it takes you to a page that's sort of designed to be like a browsing page to browse around the library and see which books you want to read. But that doesn't have any ability to put a sort of blurb about what's in the book there. So the best way for you to access this book is to come into here, and just look at this little bit of a blurb about that particular book, and you'll have a thought then about whether you want to do it. And furthermore, you can see which people it's linked to in the database. So it just takes you as a thing through that page to the actual book. So watch what happens. There it is, comes up with all the books as if you want to browse that, then it takes you straight to the book itself, yeah? So there you got, you know, the book. This is Alexander Stuart MacLennan. In fact, you know, when you look at our main website, let's just go back here. Here, these, you see those headstones there? In fact, those headstones, his father is this headstone right here. There you go. How's that? And he went over to Ontario and then on to BC. And then you can read this book. You can make it bigger and smaller by using this plus and minus down here. See, make it easier to read, or minus. You can look at this. Do you see where I'm pointing? Down the bottom, table of contents. Look at that, comes up. This is part of my having to convert this book over to this new method. I have to retype and reset up these table of contents and everything. So let's say Alexander MacLennan, community-minded citizen, page 36. You want to go there? So boom. Look, see the page coming down? There it is. Alexander MacLennan, community-minded citizen. Yeah. So that's how it works. This it takes you to the end. This takes you to the beginning. You can see a picture of Mary Davidson there, actually on the end. See, there she is. Takes you to the front page. That's him, Alexander, as a young man, as a father, and as an old man. So that's how the books work. I think I've covered every aspect of that there. Yeah. And I can close this here. I wonder what happens if I do that. Yeah, takes you back to this intermediate page that we saw before. And I could go to see this. He's quite a character, this fellow. I'd recommend you go and have a look at this one. In fact, we've got this book in here too. You know, the guide. We'll come to that shortly. And this is another book here by, you see that, can you read that? It says, I'll take you in so you can read it. What does it say? Come on, work with me. It's Fairburn, you know, where this fellow was George was the Grieve. These are all terms we've learned today. I just took that photo randomly. This is the narrow area going up through the mountains across to the west coast from really from Dingwall direction. These are all ancient places. Dingwall is a name that's thought to have been a Viking, and you know, Vikings came backwards and forwards here, of course, for many centuries when they controlled this part of the world. It's a part of history often forgotten that, you know, the Norsemen were there. And you don't, and of course you don't, if you're looking at DNA, you don't see it on people saying it's Scots people being of Norse descent, because it goes back too far, and the ancestry and the like only ever know what you've told them, and you can't know that far back, so you can't. Anyway, this is the book by my friend from Connecticut, Jamie, and her her ancestor was in the Battle of New Orleans. There, you see that? You can't see it with me. You know, in 1814 we took a little trip. Isn't that it? Yeah.
Yeah.
They fired our guns and the British kept it coming. You remember the story?
Hey, Bruce, it's Malcolm. I just signed in. Did I miss the beginning of the meeting?
Yeah. How did that happen? I'll send you the recording, Malcolm. Just
because you had the start time for 8 o'clock.
Really?
Yeah.
You better have a look at the
8 o'clock Atlantic time.
That's where I am.
Are you?
Yeah.
In Halifax time. Sorry, Malcolm.
Okay.
I'll send you the recording.
Okay. Thanks.
But
Sorry to
remind me
interrupt.
if I don't. So yeah, here's Jamie wrote this book, and you can see I've just made this cover up with her help. You know, she sent me the photo and a bit of a profile and so on, and she's copyrighted it. And look here, we're talking about more of Fairburn. Look at that. So this is the place of Fairburn, Maine. This is where He was George. So it's very appropriate we look at this book. And with her descriptions in here, she's talking about, you know, that part of the world and what was going on there, and how they went off to these, how he joined the service and went off battles, clearances, things like that. Look at that, look at that. And the you know, there's this big tower. You see there's this tower. I actually meant to include it in the preliminary photos, a photo I took of the Fairburn Tower. Yeah, it's very dilapidated now, but you know, there's this fellow, the Brahan Seer. Brahan is the Mackenzie fort name. Whoop. Come on, work with me. There you go. And the Brahan Seer is mentioned in a book. I've got a little book here that's sort of like about the Brahan Seer and what he thought. Someone's talking. Anyway, there you've got a bit of a description. You could find, if you had a relation from there, some of this would be helpful to you in finding out about what was going on there at the time. And that's what we're going to deal with in the next session, you know, the places where they lived and what was happening. And then all this section really from here on is basically just an output from a family tree program. Just saying, print out all the descendants of this fella here. Donald and Mary Mackenzie. Yeah. And so whatever, page 24, that's just some preliminary text. And then from there on, see, that's got a page 1. And then I've renumbered the pages with the other parts included. But that's page 1 of her report from her family program. Yeah. So that gets you back to here. And there you got, I've put that there at the beginning, the Chief's book. But we have the 2012 edition, which has been, the beginning part has been edited by Rurid to be more reflecting the current times. So we got there by going to this page, the histories page on the main page. Yeah, main page, histories, and then you can just browse through all those little comments and see which ones might be relevant to you. How's that? Any comments? Has anybody used that function before? Not yet. Malcolm, what about you? You ever been there to the books? Your mic's not on. Malcolm, did you know about that function?
No, I didn't actually. No, that's very good. I haven't used it myself.
It's huge, you know, huge resource. And
Yeah.
Did I show you that you can look for particular words? No, I didn't. I should have, shouldn't I? Let's go back here. Okay, were. There, we're in there. And then I should have shown you this function. What might be a word? I know his dad's name is Ewan, right? And I don't know if they spell it with an A or an E, but let's try that. No, not working. Nothing there. So maybe it's Ewan with an E. Go to that. So now we can go boom, and there it goes to that page. And here he is, a picture of Ewan. Good, eh? So that's the powerful thing about this thing, that not having a physical book printed out, you can use the search function within the books. And you see how the name is highlighted, so you can even find it on the page easier. Good, eh? So I hope you all use that function, because, you know, I put a lot of effort into it and continue to put effort with converting them over to this new method I've been living in. I've known it's coming, but I've been, you know, putting it off. Other things to do.
Hey, Bruce, try Finley MacLennan.
Finley, in the books, you mean, or what?
Yeah, from Corydaic.
Let's see what happens.
See what happens.
Oh, I didn't put the right name in.
No.
You know, that place, Corydaic, is spelt such different ways, isn't it?
Right.
That won't be him. That's a New Zealand family. This family were known to were close to my Donald, who, you know, my own books about this fellow.
Mm.
You know, my fellow went from Scotland to the place where these family were, and it's quite good to make the connection. They were really early in New Zealand, this family. Anyway, that's not him. I think though, your best way, did you come in after we talked about notes search? I think everybody agreed We talked about that one?
No, I came in at the very tail end because I was
Right.
an hour late.
Well, that's your real thing, to go to there and put that Corrievale in its various spellings or parts
Right.
of it into the notes, and you'll find everybody who was there in that part of the world.
Okay. Sorry to take it backwards.
No worries. Okay, so back to here. Oh, that's good, isn't it? So you know what all that means now? Let's just think about the other evidence that might be in the notes themselves, and that would include, let's not forget, obituaries, how powerful they can be, or reports of weddings, what happened at the wedding and afterwards, and even birth notices. But let's look at this one here. It's one I came across in putting a family together. Happens to be in Manitoba, this one. I was doing some work in Manitoba and I came across this, a really short thing, like it's hardly taking up very much space at all in this newspaper, but look how powerful this is here. In fact, we've got this woman who we know had that married name, and we know that was her maiden name, and we can see these dates, how good are they? And we can see where she died. And then it talks about she was predeceased by her husband, Clifford. That's good to know, because obviously he's Clifford Gould, yeah. And then her parents, Stuart and, maybe Elizabeth, maybe Lizzie. Often in these things, they'll use nicknames rather than, or middle names or something, rather than the full name. Look at these other names down here, like Betty and Bet. They're Elizabeth, very likely, aren't they? Because this is the sister-in-law here, yeah. Yeah. And so what a lot of powerful things. That these siblings and sisters-in-law died before she did, so that's a helpful thing to know, and you can cross-check that to see you've got the right thing. Her surviving sisters, look, you got her married name. You don't have Mrs. J. MacLennan or Mrs. J. Armstrong. You have Helen, that's good to know. Margaret, that's her married name. Brother, Jim, probably James, yeah. Sister-in-law, Mary or Marie, and so on. But, only by seeing this short newspaper report did I learn that her first husband predeceased her. She had a first husband, I didn't know. So by looking at this, I was able then to find, it's a pretty good name to be looking up, isn't it? Not many of them. And so I was able to add that to her record, that she'd had a first husband in Manitoba. How good is that, eh? They're powerful, these things. And the same with where you'd have the same sort of thing in wedding reports, saying that she was accompanied by her husband accompanied by her sister as the bridesmaid, and they give the name. And they're a bit the same with birth notices. So we shouldn't overlook these newspaper obituaries. Nonetheless, though, the mistakes can happen. That's really what I'm talking about here. And in particular, we try not to just copy other people's family trees on Ancestry. We try to look for the underlying contemporary evidence for the birth, the death, or the marriage, rather than just copy something straight from someone else's tree. Now, some people in the old days, of course, that's all you would often see. You'd just like on even 5-10 years ago on Ancestry, you just get the dates and things put in and no reference to evidence of why that is the right date for that person. A bit like your case, Star. But these days, people, I must say, are much better at putting in proper evidence, like records of their birth and death and so on. And then moving on to this next point here, in genealogy terms, people always have a bin full of strays. That means people that you can't place. And this typically is somebody like a single man or a single woman who might be a, farm servant or a domestic servant, or, just in a town working on their own. They might have migrated from where they were born to Glasgow or, somewhere else in the world, Chicago. And we don't know who they are until we find out more. From maybe very slim evidence, might just say in a foreign country, born in Scotland, not the place they came from. But if you find their death notice or something, or their headstone, it might give you more of a clue. But inevitably there will be some of these strays who you can't place, you can't put a name to, but obviously anything we can do to improve that, that's all the better. Even a married person, you might not know who, you might know they have children, you might know they have a spouse, but you might not know their parents yet. And sometimes that leads to duplication in that way, because you might have put them in as a kid, but then you don't yet know which, and then you found them as a married person with a child, with a family, spouse and children, but you don't know how to relate them to the parents, and you haven't yet got the link back to the parents. And this, of course, applies to the very earlier people more than it does to more recent people. Then, so what I'm really saying here is that it's not impossible that in our database we might have the same person twice. It's possible, and really, I'd love you to tell me about that. If you come across any of these cases where we've got the person twice, get onto me and just say, look, I've got proof that these are really the same person. Hooray, I'll say, that's great. We can merge them together. I won't do it just because, I need some evidence to do that, not just do it because they look pretty similar. And sometimes, just occasionally, I'll say, this could be the same as I number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Please send some evidence if you think it is. You'll see that just occasionally. Yeah. So we do need some help for this whole exercise. And if anybody who feels like contributing, of course, some editing things would be the best thing. If we could, anybody would like to check some lists, let's say, like all the Manitoba marriages, let's say, that would be an example. I can easily pull up a spreadsheet of all the marriages, and someone could go through and say, yes, we have that one, yes, we have that one, we don't have that one. And then we can go about adding these extra people. So it's a way of now cross-checking that how complete our records are against these official records, like, anywhere, really. You can do it for any part of the world. And a similar thing with books. How good would it be if somebody went through Chief Ronnie's book and put the ID number against every person he mentions in there? How good would that be as a way of cross-checking that we've got all the people he knows about? So we just, that's a way of doing this building. Another thing we might have is that if you felt like it, if someone was a good typing person, there are 2 types of transcription that we need. And one would be transcribing just short documents. Another would be transcribing long things, things that, like books that we don't have, that I can't OCR, that's an example. Handwritten books, I've got some of those. Usually I can, do optical character recognition on the print versions. Not always, but that usually works pretty well. And you can become a full editor to edit up the pages if you wish. We'd love you to, some more people to be editors. And I have training available to do that. I've got a training database where you can go in and practice doing what you like. Some people there are nodding, they've done that before. And then we've got guidance on how to make the pages consistent, that's whether it's right or wrong what we have, it's what we do, and obviously it should be done consistently. It's
a very good training, Bruce.
Thank you, Stephen.
The how to do it, it's very easy. So
yeah,
thank
good.
you.
The records themselves are password protected and so on, so that gives a bit of comfort to people who contributed their family histories and the like. Available to all financial clan members. And a lot of volunteer hours have gone into developing these resources, and I hope that people using it to do their own work would duly acknowledge the work that's gone into our records. And I really would rather hope that things weren't just copied willy-nilly, like copying the death and birth certificates and so on that we've put into our records, into Ancestry. That would be a bit cheeky, I would have thought. But obviously copy the other information and acknowledge that it's there. I just want to briefly mention this side menu before we close this session. And there are 3 things in particular that I would like to talk about. One is the stats. We looked at that last week, and you can see that that's here, clan stats. The World War I Roll of Honour. Stephen worked on that too. There's there it is there. And the free e-travel guide, that's that travel guide there. So We hadn't in this session talked much about this dark coloured menu. The rest of them mainly are just going back to the main, it's like on the other pages of the rest of the Clan website. But those few there are unique to this. Oh, look at that. So Clan stats, you know, we saw last week how you've got the graph like this. Remember we saw that last week? And we've got the different places here coming up. That's the 1871 Gearlock Applecross. Is that what that is? No, 1810. Oh no, the 1971 people, the nearly 2,000 people born in Scotland in the decade from 1810. So look at that. They're all, look at, there's Urry there that we talked about today. These other ones you know about. I hope you're feeling much more comfortable now with it. And you click on these. Some of them I think might be not working so well because the PHP's moved on since we wrote this content. But there's some, look, there's the same one, 18, oh, that's 1800. And look at those places, very familiar to you now, Fodderty, you know. And you can click on here and go to the further ones. Look at this, Urquhart and Logie Wester, Buig, you know, that's out on Lewis now. A lot of these places are familiar to you now. Look at these ones that, you know, Kilmorack I talked about, that's Bewley and so on. There's another Black Isle one. There's another one out on the Outer Hebrides. This is on Skye. Allness we didn't talk about, but we could have. Stornoway, you know, and that's it. And I can go down here to all the other decades, and you see a similar pattern. An interesting thing as you come later down, it's a nice thing, isn't it? You come later, you see that increasingly we're moving to Glasgow. See that? Edinburgh is starting to appear on the top of the list that we didn't see earlier on. Look at that. By the time you get to 1900, the most MacLennan births are happening in Glasgow. How about that? And these other places. And you can see all these ones around here. Look at them. This is much more dynamic than the one we saw earlier. All these little parishes. Good, eh? So that's the stats. I've talked about that. Let me just see where I'm up to here. Oh, we've got a lot of things here. Close that one. Close that one. Back to here. And I was going to talk about World War I Roll of Honour. How many of you have seen Roll of Honour before? Hands up. No. This is a dynamic thing. You saw how that was a bit slower loading this page here. It's because it's drawing it from a Google Docs spreadsheet. Hey, Stephen. You know, it's the PHP's been written to access that spreadsheet on Google Docs, and it populates this table here. This is a guy that we're all a bit familiar with. He's one of these people from the parish of Avoch. You know, that's one of the Black Isle parishes. And they, in Avoch, often, not often, but there are some of them who spell the name with an M in the middle instead of a double N when they're at home. And when they go out into the world, they spell it with a double N. So this guy is one such person. And you go to him. That's a public page. You can then go, and I might be asked to log on here. Forget it. You see, that's, you know, this page is designed really to for external people to be drawn into the clan. So, and so there's a full list there of all the people from all around the world who died in the First World War, and of injuries after, to some extent, not so much really. If you go down to the bottom of that page there, you'll see there are just a couple that are in after the war ended. Yep. Quite a list though. Quite a lot of work went into that. And this gives you often their parents and so on out here. And you can go obviously from here to their actual page. In fact, I can go out here. You see out here, you've got the I number, and we should be able to just click on that directly and go there. Let's see what happens. Let's see if I click on that. Ah, that's better. Whoa. So this guy was a school teacher from this place in Inverness. That's just south on the A9 of Inverness. And, you know, he went off to the war and was killed. I don't know why that's come up with it. It's not a date, not a death date there, is there? Bit of a mystery, that one. You can't have died in the war, 1862. Might be the wrong number. Let's try another one. So let's try this one. Yeah. And he's called, don't worry what he's called. That's better. So this, you see, is giving, you know, he died in France, and look at that. That was just after the war started, wasn't it? Very early one. And, you know, he's remembered at this war cemetery, and he was a compositor, you know, a printing person. And there's a document of his effects. Well, there isn't. Don't know why that is. Maybe it's an odd document type. See, it doesn't have a thumb there. Oh, there's supposed to be a picture. Look at that. I'll have to have a think about that one too. So that's the roll of honour. We're now on the second one here. And then the other one we're going to look at is the travel guide. Who's already opened up the travel guide? If you click on this one here, it takes you to, in this case, it's giving me the download. And, you know, this is the travel guide book that I put together for the 2018. We launched it there. And in here, you've got a number of places that are important. You see they're all marked there, clan places, you know, interesting places. This is the table of contents. Here's a thing about the MacLennan Way walk. So you can click on that, takes you there, MacLennan Way walk. It takes you to the map here, the old 1826 map, and shows you how this used to be a road where this walk goes. This is the Strathconnell. Can you see where my cursor is there? Strathconnell through there, and then you get to the end of the Strathconnell now, and from there you can go on this saddle up and over to here. That used to be walking a way of getting between Dingwall and the west coast, until the route around this way was chosen instead by Telford when they redid the roads. So it's a place where our ancestors used to walk over this area. It's a spectacular thing. You look out on all these mountain tops around the background area, and this is this lock in here. There's a lock here. That you see that water there? And that, Malcolm, that's interesting to you, isn't it? This is your part of the world in here you're talking about.
Right.
And yeah, we are setting out in 2018. Look, going up the hill. That's me there. That's my friend Chris from New Zealand. And these are two guys. These two guys, one's from British Columbia and the other one is from south in Scotland. And they arrived just at the nick of time to get on the bus to come with us. And this tells you how to go to that lodge to you can stay there, and they'll take you around to this start point for the walk, and then pick you up at the other end if you need to be picked up. It's a little bit of a walk, not much, a mile or two at the end. So these are different parts that, you know, you can look through, and the nice thing is that we've got on here the actual coordinates for the location. So if you're using it, you just download this ebook free. You're getting it on your phone, say. You can use it to walk you to a place, to this locality, or drive you there, you know, get the directions as you go along. Just click on that, you know, in the usual fashion. Little Google Maps will just take you, you know, turn left at the next intersection, 200 yards or whatever. Yeah, so everywhere we've got the coordinates in there for all these places. Yeah, so you don't need to think about it much. Yeah, I will update this from time to time to as new things emerge. In fact, this page here has been revised since the earliest version about this fellow known as Holy Alec. He was the provost of Stornoway. And also I put this in here about this mill that was its whole life, from the time it was built till the time it burnt down, was associated with MacLennans. First, the wife of the mill owner was a MacLennan, and then her nephew from Compton took it over and managed it. Even though it's now called Latter's Mill, it actually had more MacLennan association than it did with the Latters over its full life. Yep, so these are things you can do in these places. You know, it's an interesting way of delving into what happened. Take you to these different parts. So that's the last of those things that we're talking about in this dark menu here.